tonight we're luck tonight we're lucky to have Emily Tom. She's a CBAP. She's an independent consultant. She's based in Ottawa, Canada. She's an aspiring writer and speaker, and she's gonna write something. And eventually, we're gonna auction off her book when you write it, Emily. So we'll be your first customer, maybe, but not your last. And she's passionate about the BA profession, and she's sharing her time with us to talk about using BA skills and discipline to get ready for, you know, job interviews, and even after you're done, it's not, everyone knows when your interview's over, you're not done with it, right? You still have work to do. So Emily's gonna talk about that and enlighten us on that. So I'll turn it over to you, Emily. I don't know if you have more to introduce, but hopefully I didn't chop it up too bad.
It's all good, Bob. Thank you so much for
Okay,
the introduction. And I
thank
think
you.
Vu, you've really teed it up for me coming from a recruiting firm. Let me share my screen. I do have a slide deck here. Okay, so
I
you
guess we should
folks,
mention too that your slide deck will be available after the meeting, right? Steve, we're gonna
Yep.
post it.
Yep.
And Emily is gracious enough to have us record the meeting too, so that playback will be available later. Sorry, Emily.
yeah, of course. So thank you everyone for teeing this up for me. I'm so happy to be back. I think this is my second time presenting to your chapter. I'm happy to share and learn from you folks as well. For this evening, I'm going to be talking about how to use business analysis to prepare for a BA interview. So let's say you've landed the interview. How can we actually apply our business analysis skills to give us an even greater edge to excel in the interview? So I think this is it's a timely presentation, and I hope to get some engagement from you folks as well. So if you have any questions or have any comments, please drop them in the chat. I believe Steve and Bob are watching the chat, and we'll jump in if there are any hands raised. So I'm going to keep on going. For this evening, we have, it looks like a long agenda, but I promise this will be an engaging discussion. Well, I'll tell some war stories along the way, so we'll keep it interesting. What I'm going to be talking about is why are BA interviews so hard? And how can we actually use business analysis to serve ourselves to be able to get that job? And then I'll talk about the context for some of the advice I'm going to be providing. And what do you do before, during, and after that interview? And hopefully this will help boost your confidence so that you can get that job and that you'll excel in the job as well. So first of all, why is interviewing for a BA job so hard? I've been doing this for many years, so I have some war wounds as well. Does anyone have any thoughts on why is it that job interviews, especially BA ones, are so hard? If anyone wants to speak up or put in the chat some of your thoughts.
I'll say my experience was that at the time, I didn't know what everything was called in business analysis. So when I looked up jobs descriptions, I'm like, I don't know what any of that stuff is. I mean, today I know that I knew what that stuff was, but just understanding the lingo and the concepts in an interview probably.
It's a good point. Yeah, so there's a learning process as well. I hope that if people want to chime in, that would be great, because hopefully we'll be able to answer some of these questions or address some of these issues about how do you overcome some of those issues when preparing for a job interview. I know in my past, like, I've sat in several job interviews in my time, and I think some of it can be intimidating, especially when you really don't know a whole lot about the company or the organization, or perhaps the organization doesn't really have a good understanding of business analysis. So when you show up at the interview, you're speaking a certain language and they're speaking a different language, and you're just trying to match up. Any other thoughts?
One thing that I've seen is there's definitely a difference between sort of like a technical BA, like a business systems analyst, versus a business analyst. And there's a certain amount of people that are not technical at all. And I think there's confusion on the part of the person, maybe, of the capabilities that they need. And I know some of that's in the job description, and maybe people don't read that as carefully as they should. But some people just have a technical blackout, and they're only really trying to be a business analyst, not a business systems analyst.
Right. So look, trying to make sure that you actually are qualified for the job, that you know what they're looking for. Yeah, it can be challenging. I think there was another comment in the chat.
Yeah, it says, I've done more hiring than interviewing in the last several years. It's challenging to confidently determine someone can really do the job based on an interview.
Right. So in some cases, there can be multiple rounds of interviews, but in other cases, there's only the one interview, and that's your one shot at making a good impression. Okay, I'm gonna move on and see, like, if you do have some other thoughts, please chime in, and hopefully we'll have some back and forth going on as well. So the good news is that you can actually apply business analysis to get the job for a business analyst. And here I'll explain why, some of my thoughts. Well, first of all, you know how to do business analysis, right? I'm assuming that most of you have done business analysis or are a business analyst, and you're applying for a BA job, you know how to do the work. So just knowing that you know how to do the work gives you some level of confidence. And being able to apply it when you're actually doing the process helps you with that confidence as well. I'm also going to be talking about a methodical approach. You know how we business analysts like to understand the big picture and all the small details in that big picture, and we like to think about our as is and our to be and how we're going to address those gaps. Well, I'll be talking about this approach that we can use to help us organize our thoughts about this job interview. The other thing that you're going to do as you're preparing for that BA job is that it's going to help you demonstrate your skill and your knowledge. So we're going to use business analysis to prepare for the interview, but also when you're in the interview, you can demonstrate some of those BA skills as well. So for the person who commented earlier that it's hard to understand whether the person is really qualified, I'll give some tips on how you can actually talk like a business analyst and give the interviewer some confidence that you know what they're talking about. So for the context for this particular talk, let's assume that you have secured the job interview. It's for a business analyst position. It can either be a salary position or a contract job. And let's say you're going to use business analysis skills to prepare for the interview, participate in it, and perform lessons learned. So this should start sounding familiar, right? When we do our business analysis work, we prepare for it, we conduct the work, and we do lessons learned. And what I'd like to do is help you organize your thoughts, where you're going to prepare the information about yourself and about the organization and try to match up the two so that you know that you're a good fit for the job and the job is a good fit for you. I've taken jobs where I got hired, but they weren't necessarily the best fit, and I just didn't enjoy my time there. So that has happened to me as well. So it's really a two-way street. You're trying to see if you're trying to demonstrate you're qualified for the job, but that you'll also be happy performing the job as well. So let's say you've secured an interview, and what are we going to do in order to be prepared for this interview? Well, we're going to do lots of planning. And what I'd like to do is talk about what do you have to do to know yourself, to be prepared so that you understand your skills as a BA, and as well, what preparation you have to do to understand the organization that's hiring. So what I suggest is you write things down. Just, you don't have to present anything, but write it down so that you become aware of your own skills. So do a SWOT on yourself, plot out your strengths and weaknesses and how you would use those strengths and weaknesses to take advantage of opportunities and counter the threats. This is going to give you a lot of this is going to improve your self-awareness so that when you're in the job interview, you're not going to get stumped when they say, tell me about yourself. When they ask you, tell me about yourself, you will have done your SWOT, so you will understand your strengths and weaknesses, right? The other thing I would also suggest is to include any volunteer experiences you might have. So whether you volunteer for an IIBA chapter or you've done some other volunteer work, all of that adds to your skills and your knowledge, even though it wasn't a paid job. So make sure that you account for any skills and knowledge you acquired through volunteer experiences, and especially if they're related to business analysis. Another thing that I like to do is try to prepare or try to understand what is my vision of the job. So if you can imagine yourself actually having been hired, and what would it look like if you're performing that job? So that way, when you get to the interview, you can explain how you would solve their problems. Another thing that's important or useful to know about yourself is, what are you passionate about? Maybe you are passionate about helping a nonprofit organization. Maybe you're passionate about education. So these are the kinds of things that you can use to just write it in a journal or write it in a document, just to understand yourself so that you can sell yourself when you actually get to the interview. And then what about the organization themselves? So yes, there's the job description, and there's usually some kind of introductory paragraph about the organization and what this job is about. What I suggest is also research what's the organization's strategy. I think a lot of business analysts, we all want to get involved. We hope for opportunities to get involved with shaping the strategy of an organization or helping them achieve their mission and vision, right? Being brought in earlier in the project instead of just being dropped in later when you're just trying to keep things afloat. We want to be involved early so that we can work on requirements, so I can really understand the organization's business goals. So how do you do this? What's important is to understand the organization's objectives. Are they trying to are they trying to focus on budgets? Are they trying to focus on marketing or new target market, for example? Are they trying to leverage technology to be more competitive? So those are the things that I would be looking for when I'm researching an organization. So I'd be looking for their mission and vision. And where do you get this? I actually found it helpful to get their annual report if they actually do publish one. Because an annual report doesn't just show the finances, the balance sheet, but it also shows what initiatives this organization's working on. What do they plan to achieve in the next year, 3 years, 5 years? And we all know that from our big, thick Babok that we look at things like strategy analysis. So that when we're working on business analysis, we want to make sure that our work as BAs contributes to the strategy. And funny story here with the annual report. I did this in my most recent contract job. My most recent contract job is with a Canadian government entity called CATSA. So it's equivalent to, in the US, you have TSA at the airports. So when I interviewed for this job or prepared for the interview, I really didn't know a whole lot about airport security other than my experience as a passenger going through screening. So I pulled up their annual report to see what exactly this organization does, or what are some of the challenges they're trying to address. And from their annual report, they're always trying to balance innovation and technology, but also making sure above everything, they're ensuring passenger safety. So they have to make sure they ensure passenger safety, but their budgets are really tight. So I had to understand all of their language, and to Steve's point, understand the lingo by looking at their annual report. Understand how your project that you would be hired for would fit or help them meet the strategy that's outlined in the annual report. Another thing you can do is look at gap analysis. The annual report might give you some clues as to what's their current situation and where do they want to go, and what are the things that they need to do, what are the initiatives that they need to carry out in order to bridge those gaps. So these are the things that you'll study, and you would write down all your questions. You know how we as business analysts write down a lot of questions, right? So this is the same thing. You're preparing for the elicitation activity by writing down any questions you might have. You might write down how this particular project relates to the organization's mission and vision. So when they say something like, we want to increase our market share by X%, well, on the IT project you're on, how would that contribute to the mission and vision? You might also want to ask them about success criteria. So you would write these down as well. Suppose you're being hired to work on a particular project. I would be interested to know how will we know if the project has been successful? So what are the goals of the project? And what is the solution that the project is trying to deliver? And how do we know if that solution is successful? So these are the kinds of things that you would write down. And these are the things I hope that you're doing as BAs as well. Are there any questions before I move on to what you do during the interview? All right. Okay, so during the interview, and again, I'm going to split it out into things that focus on you and things that focus on the organization. So what about you? They're going to start asking you questions, and they'll give you different scenarios. So they might give you a situation or a scenario to say, Emily, what would you do in this situation where you have stakeholders across 3 different time zones and many different requirements? How would you get consensus on the requirements? So one of the common ways of being able to approach that question is the STAR method. And I don't know if many of you have heard of the STAR method, but the STAR method stands for situation, tasks, activities, and results. So what you could do is, if they throw a scenario at you, you could reflect back on your past experience and think of some similar situation. What were the tasks that you had to perform? What were the activities that you carried out? And what were the results? Did you have success? Did you solve a problem? So this is an approach that you can use to answer a situation-based question. And as I had mentioned earlier in the presentation, when you're in the interview, it is a two-way street. You're trying to see if you're trying to show that you're a good fit for the job, but also understanding if the job is a good fit for you. So you could go there with the questions that you had written down and ask some of those unanswered questions. And I wouldn't necessarily go through the list of questions like a script, but what I would do is preface the question first. For example, so I learned from some of your online documentation, like your annual report, that you're trying to resolve an issue with legislation or compliance with legislation. And then you could follow that up with questions. So first you tee it up with the topic that you want to ask a question about, and then you ask the question. So that helps them set the context so they can actually answer you. Are there any questions or comments? I think I saw something in the chat. All right,
No,
I'll
that
keep,
was just me.
okay.
I was talking about, like when you said doing the research on the company, I wouldn't exclude doing research on the competition as well. Because that question
That's,
came up in my last interview and I was ready for it.
Yeah, that's also a really good strategy. Understanding what their competition is doing, and when you're conducting yourself in the interview, you want to show that you're on their side. You can say, like, I see that, your competition is doing all these things, and this is what I can help you do to gain a competitive advantage. Or these are some opportunities that I think that your company can take advantage of that your competition isn't doing yet. So you can help sell yourself by offering these services to help the company succeed. So that's a really good point as well. And of course, you're going to learn some of that lingo, right, Steve? All right. Of course, take notes. And you know that we as BAs are good at doing this, right? We're full of questions, but we also take notes and we write things down. And you could even, as you're in the interview, you might want to like do a mind map to help you organize the information. And this is going to help you have that engaging discussion with with the interviewer, as opposed to just going through a script. So as you're taking notes, you're also formulating your thoughts so that you can have that discussion with them. You also would want to talk about how your experience has achieved goals. So I'm wondering if this sounds familiar to you, describing the as-is situation that was in a particular project that you worked on, and then describing the to be that the project was trying to accomplish, and then what actually happened at the end after you did the work. So the as is, to be, and the accomplishments starts to sound like gap analysis, doesn't it? And that's what we do as BAs, we do gap analysis. So you can talk about how you advanced your previous employers through a project. They might also ask you how you apply different BA techniques. This is a thing that's pretty standard. And again, know yourself. Look at all your experiences that were in your resume and think about all the BA techniques that you used on the different experiences. Another thing that you could reflect on is some failures. They might ask you, can you describe something that failed? Or if they give you a situation and they say, Emily, how would you resolve that problem? And for me, if I tried to resolve that problem at a previous employer and I failed, I wouldn't necessarily skip over that. But what I would do is be honest and say that I had that same situation in my previous company. Having learned from that situation, if I could do it again, this is what I would do. So you're not discounting that previous experience. You're actually using that experience and talking about the lessons learned. And you could also link your skills to their success criteria. Do you remember how I said in the previous slide, think about the success criteria? What would be the success criteria for the project? And what would be the success criteria for the solution? So link all of your skills and your knowledge to the criteria that they're looking for. So again, this is selling yourself. But what about them? Do you remember I'm going to keep talking about you and them? So about the organization, you could ask them, how is business analysis conducted in your organization? What does it look like? They could be talking about the processes and the techniques that they use. This is going to give you an idea of whether you would fit in, or this could give you an idea of how mature their processes are and where you might be able to help advance their maturity as well. If you're going for a salaried position, you could ask about BA growth opportunities. You could ask them, how does a BA advance their skills or increase their knowledge? What kinds of benefits do you offer in terms of training, for example? You could also ask them, how does, like, when you talk about how does business analysis look like in the organization, you could ask them to tell some stories about how business analysis was applied in some of their previous projects and engagements. What were some of the successes and failures? And how is it that you could help them achieve more successes and help them with lessons learned that they had from the failures? Could also ask them, how do they do requirements analysis and requirements management? Because that's really a big thing that we as BAs do, right? We work with requirements, and it's good to understand how mature are they with working with requirements. Because if they don't really have a good requirements management process, and I'm not talking about the technology, I'm just talking about how do they progress requirements to the actual solution. You want to know how well they do this so that you'll be happy working there. And you can also ask them to talk about the project, get some more information about what they're hiring you for and who you'd be working with. Who are the project stakeholders, the people beyond the project who are in the organization, and then some of the external stakeholders. And please do not ask them to plot the onion diagram, but in your mind, think about the onion diagram. Think about how you have those concentric circles, and you can ask them probing questions about how this project is going to be bought into by their organization and by the external clients. Or how will this solution that you're trying to deliver be supported by their IT support? Or how it's going to be accepted by the different stakeholder groups. So when you understand their stakeholders, that'll also give you a sense of what you're getting into.
Mhm.
Any questions?
Yeah, Emily, I have a question a little bit back and reflect my failures. Maybe when I'm in a situation that I have to answer my last conflict with my manager or the missed deadline, and I may be a bit nervous and get a blackout and cannot answer immediately. What would your strategy in such a moment when you have to reflect something? Of course, in the past it happened, but you cannot recall it. What really the case, because it maybe was a few years back, what's then the best reaction in such situations?
Well, first, I wouldn't necessarily ignore the fact that a mistake was made. But what you could do is, talk about how at the time you tried your best to achieve the project deadlines and do the proper work, but the deadline was missed because X, Y, and Z. And you can talk about how, looking back at that, if X, Y, and Z were all lined up properly, then you would have had greater success. Or, maybe you didn't have that particular situation, but if they throw that situation at you, again, use that STAR method. Think about the situation and what tasks would need to be done, what activities you would do, and what results you would hope to achieve, and how you're going to stay on track so that you don't miss the deadlines. Hopefully, this whole talk will also help you prepare for that somewhat standard question. Remember in the planning phase where we talk about reflecting on your past experiences? Reflect on those failures as well, because
Yep.
if they ask you about them, you're prepared to talk about them. Like, what were the lessons you learned from that failure?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't have the magic bullet here. I'm a business analyst like the rest of you folks, but these are some of the things that I've learned along the way, and hopefully others here can contribute as well. Any other thoughts or questions? Oh, someone spelled out the STAR method. Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
We learn something every day, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I know I threw a lot
Thank
at you. This session is recorded and you will have a copy of the slide deck. But what I want to stress here is that the interview is a two-way street, right? You're talking about yourself, but you're also learning about the organization. And conduct yourself as a business analyst, right? We've done requirements workshops. This is similar to that. You're working with the stakeholder, you're doing some elicitation to understand what it is that they're looking for. You're thinking about how your skills and your knowledge can line up with what they're looking for as well. So this is similar to what we do as BAs when we're doing our workshops. Now, hopefully you've done your preparation up front so that when you walk into the interview, you have some things to offer. And the other thing, actually, another thought came up to me, and this is kind of ironic because let's say you're having this whole discussion with them and you forgot a very important point to one of their questions. Or sorry, you forgot a very important point in your experience that you forgot to mention 2 or 3 questions back. There's no problem saying so. You could say, oh, and something just occurred to me when you're asking about X. Another thing I wanted to mention is, and then you can state your point. So it is a conversation. And if you have important things to say about your experiences, then go ahead. If you think that they're important and helpful to the interview, then go ahead. And that's why it's also important to have that notepad where you can write down the questions and write down the notes as you're going along as well. Because
Emily, I was going to ask you about that. Is it,
Mhm.
do you think it's required or I don't know, is it a good thing to ask if you could take notes first before you start taking notes? Or should you
I've
just
never done
take the
that,
liberty?
but maybe other folks in this call, maybe Wu might have some opinions on that. I've never asked, but if you're sitting in an interview and it's half an hour
Yeah.
or an hour, you can't memorize everything, right?
Yeah.
I jump in, Emily. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Even when I was working at Google, the STAR method is so accomplishing, and then taking notes is just. I've never asked. It's kind of, or I've never had my candidates kind of ask. It's kind of just assumed that they're writing down. It shows maybe an effort that you're taking down notes and really trying to track what everything is being said. And even if
Yeah.
you don't have that answer right away, just like if you even want to give it like a few seconds, I think that just shows your ability to step back and kind of ascertain the whole situation. So to that point, I think it's completely fine to take notes.
I'm just wondering
Yeah.
too, like if you say, do you mind if I take notes? That way, when you're talking with the person, if your camera's on your face and then you start to look down, and they're wondering like, what are you doing? And you didn't tell
Oh.
them you're taking notes, they're like,
I would say, well, tell them, you can just tell them as opposed to asking for permission.
yeah,
You could say,
okay.
look, I know that we're going to have a very engaging conversation here, and there could be many topics that we're talking about. I'm just going to be taking some notes just to make sure that we're organizing our thoughts here.
Yep, that's a good way to approach
Okay.
it.
As
And-
BAs, when we walk into an elicitation, we're taking notes, right?
Mhm.
So if you don't take notes now, how will they know you're going to take notes then, right? It's just
Yeah.
our pattern to take notes.
And are there any distinctions between a virtual interview versus an in-person interview that you could point out?
I wasn't necessarily going with that perspective.
Okay, no, it's
But of
fine.
course, like make eye contact by looking at that little green dot on the camera,
Mhm.
right? Don't disappear off the camera, but also remember with technology, right? There can be a lag and you can't have 2 people speaking at once.
Yeah.
So you do have to pause and let them speak, right? So
Mhm.
it takes practice. Now, hopefully over the past 4 years, we've had lots of practice with online meetings. But
Yep.
again, I think with virtual, it is more challenging because you're not reading their body language, right? There's only that 2-inch square. So you
Right.
really do have to pay attention. You do have to make sure, like, yeah, take notes, of course, but really pay attention, because I've seen people who just take notes but aren't paying attention to the conversation. So then they miss a point, or they get caught off guard. So
Yep.
you're going to have to learn that active listening as you go along as well.
The,
So
the other thing
it's
too
skill.
that I think is different in person versus maybe virtual is at my company, they're big now on panel interviews. So they want to make sure that, you know, there's no bias or whatever. So they'll get a panel that's like a cross section of different people, et cetera, et cetera. And you know, if you're sitting there one-on-one, I think it's a different level of engagement than if I don't even know what a panel interview would look like. I haven't been on, like, if the camera would be sitting
Oh,
outside so
it's
you could see 5
so
people.
intimidating.
Yeah. Or if it would just
No.
switch to the person asking the question.
Yeah, yeah. Or they all, like, all 3 of them log on to the Zoom meeting is what happens normally, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, it can be somewhat intimidating. I've been through that. Again, pause to let the speaker speak, because you get that lag with the technology. And yeah, of course it can be distracting, but keep an eye on the camera, even though you might want to focus on their faces on the screen.
Okay.
So yeah, it does take practice. Maybe it's a good exercise to perhaps practice with your friends. Just the eye contact thing and holding a conversation in an online format.
Yep.
But yeah, you raised some good points, Bob. Like, you know, how do you take notes and make it not look like you're playing Tetris off to the side, right?
Right.
So make it like, how do you keep that level of engagement? And yeah, it does certainly take practice.
Yep.
But of course, what I would say is, for me, when I see their faces on the screen, I make note of who's in which position, you know, like, you know, Mary, Joe, and John are on screen. I make sure I remember who they all are so I can place names to the faces, and I make note of who said what as well. So I got lots of blank paper to make all of that note, all those notes. And when you can show that you're doing that active listening, and especially in an online meeting, it can go a long way.
Yes.
Of
Thank you.
course, minimize all the other distractions, try to reduce the clutter behind you, turn off your phone, those kinds of things, right? Make sure you have good lighting. So all the things that we've learned since the beginning of the pandemic. And of course, don't forget all your business analysis acumen. Just to throw that in there. So on this screen, yeah, we have what you do as the interviewee, you know, the STAR method, asking those questions that you had written down during your preparation, being prepared for the scenarios and the explaining the failures that you've experienced and how you've overcome them, or what you would do in a similar situation again. Ask them questions about their organization and how the job, how that position fits into the overall mission and vision, how you can help them achieve their mission and vision. So you're selling yourself. And I believe that we do this as BAs when we're doing our elicitation in any case. So you can demonstrate that you're doing this elicitation. You might also want to talk about some of the business analysis. You might also want to give them a sample of how you would solve their problem. So for example, they could be talking about how they have many different stakeholders, lots of requirements that are not very well organized. And you could jump right in and you could talk about how requirements classification and requirements traceability can be a really useful way to organize the requirements. So you're giving them a sample of what you would do as a BA in that discussion. So you're not selling the shop, but you're giving them a sample. So that demonstrates that you can actually do business analysis. Any questions before I move on to what do you do after the interview? Okay, well, I'm also open to questions at the end of the presentation as well. So what do you do after the interview? Of course, think about what you have learned about the interview. What insights did you gain about their company? So if there's some other job opportunity that opens up with that company, what have you learned? So these are things that might not be published on their website, or they might not be published in their annual report. But did you learn some things about their company that you wrote down on your notepad that should a new job opportunity come along, you have that intel already? So write that down. Or what insights did you get about what are the hiring managers looking for in a BA? Did they ask you certain questions that you would be prepared to answer next time? And again, what are the lessons learned? What went well, what didn't go well? And did you identify any gaps in your skills and knowledge so that you could learn some of those things? And I guess I'm sort of talking about what do you do if you didn't get the job, but this could also apply to what do you do if you do get hired, right? So what insights did you learn so that when you show up on day one on the job, you're ready to go? And what are some of the lessons you learned about this company so that you can apply them going forward? What are some of the gaps that you learned that you might need to brush up on so that you're ready for the job? And for the organization, be courteous, wish them well. Whether or not they hire you, you hope that they find a great BA hire to help them solve their problems, and thank them for their time and insights, of course. So I want to give some final tips to help us boost our confidence so that we can go ahead and succeed in those job interviews. So for me, it's good to speak from the heart. You're not trying to memorize things. You're not trying to invent stories. Just speak from your experience and from what you've done in the past. And that way you don't even have to memorize things, right? And so you know what you're good at. You know what are some of the weaknesses that you're working on. You know what some of the past experience, what previous jobs you really enjoyed. These are things that you can talk about from the heart without even having to memorize much. Of course, it's okay to bring notes and to take notes during the interview, and it shows that you're doing your active listening as well. Talk about what you're passionate about and how you're pursuing your passions. So from my experience in talking to team leaders and managers and hiring managers, they like to see some level of enthusiasm and energy from candidates. If someone is just there to get a paycheck, then that might not be the best job for them, or that might not be the best candidate for them. They want to see some energy and some passion and how you're actually trying to meet your goals. They might ask you about your weaknesses. This is a pretty standard interview question, right? What are your weaknesses? And it's okay to talk about your weaknesses. And you can talk about what are you doing to try and improve on those weaknesses? Like for me, one of my weaknesses is that I'm a perfectionist. And that holds me back because I want things just right before I ship them out the door. Or my standards are really, really high and it's hard for other people to align with my standards. That's my weakness, is the perfectionism. And the way that I'm trying to improve is trying to understand what's good enough for the project to keep moving forward. I'm also trying to take into consideration other people's strengths and weaknesses, and they don't all have to agree with me. So they don't have to live by my standards. They have their own strengths and weaknesses as well. So it's okay to talk about weaknesses, but talk about how you're working to improve on them. And finally, treat this whole thing like a BA project or a BA initiative, right? So as BAs, we're always trying to solve problems, right? So what do you do with a problem like a BA interview? What are you trying to achieve? You're trying to get hired for a job where you can excel and grow as a business analyst, I hope. So what are you going to do to get there? So treat this as a BA project, right? Do your gap analysis, think about your strengths and weaknesses, and think about the requirements. So these are all the things that you know how to do, and you can do it and you can succeed. So along with all the standard interviewing skills, overlay that with business analysis. And it's, for me, it's really cool that way. So having talked about all this, does anyone have any thoughts about how business analysis will help you in the job hunting job? We talked about how business analysis BA job interviews are so hard. Do you see how business analysis can help you actually get that job? Any thoughts? Feel free to put in the chat or speak up.
I think it gives you structure, it gives you discipline. It helps you get prepared. You know,
Yeah.
as analysts, right, we like to gather all the information and then out pops, the magic answer sometimes. So, yeah, I think, and also I think it helps you, maybe not for a particular job, but if you're job seeking, to start doing, I think you raised a good point, to start doing your self-evaluation, your SWOT analysis. Maybe there's some areas that you need to beef up on before you start hitting the interview circuit. So there's definitely a lot of good things that you can get from being or applying business analysis techniques to your search.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Even if you don't have an interview yet, you can still do business analysis on yourself. And you know how we keep on lamenting that companies and organizations don't do business analysis enough or properly. If only they had hired a BA to help them do the job. Well, you yourself deserve some business analysis as well, right? So treat this business problem like a BA business problem and apply some of these skills. And like Bob said, there is structure to this, right? Understanding yourself and understanding the organization and where the two can meet. So hopefully the structure will help you plot out all the information. There can be a lot of fear and anxiety when you're engaging in a job search. Framing it as a BA task can potentially alleviate some of that. Of course. So the other thing that I have told people that I've coached is think of this as a journey, right? So you're not going to get every job. You're going to interview for things, but you might not succeed every time. So think of this as a learning opportunity. You're learning what worked, what didn't work. If you didn't get the job, perhaps it just wasn't a good fit. So there might be another candidate that was a better fit, and those are things that you can work on, right? So failure is okay. You're going to learn from that as well. So it is a journey. Any other thoughts or questions? And hopefully I haven't rubbed a recruiter the wrong way. Vu, if you have any thoughts or anything that you would like, anything I said that you would like to challenge, I'm open to that as well. Or if anyone else in the audience has any questions or comments, they're welcome as well. All right. And you will have the presentation. You can always reach me on LinkedIn. So you'll be able to get this link as well. And I really enjoyed having this opportunity to share with you and to learn what BA life is like in Sacramento. And I will stop sharing and hand the floor back. Over to you, Steve or Bob.
Yeah, thank you. Before we jump into the raffle and the quiz, Bob, did you want to say anything or?
No, I think we covered everything in the beginning, but I do want to again mention to people, if you are interested in pursuing one of the open board positions in 2025, please send me an email. My email's address is in the chat, or you have Stevie's email address, I think, from some of the communication. So just reach out to us and we'll get back to you. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm probably send out enough emails that everybody has my email address. Okay, so we're going to jump into the quiz, which means you need to have your menti.com up on your phone. Let me share my screen again. Share screen 3. And then if you're in there, you're just looking at the agenda, there's a thumbs up in the lower right. You can click just so I know you're there. Share. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep. We see
okay.
the agenda.
Nice. Okay, thank you. All right, so the way this quiz works, there's 5 questions. You get points for getting it right, and you get points for answering it quickly. We'll give it a second, see if we can get a few more players. And for this one, the prize is a $25 Amazon gift card. 9, can we get to 10? Are you in there, Bob? Right, here we go. There we go. There's
Yeah, I
10.
put myself in as Elon. There's 15
All right.
people on the call, Steve.
All right. That was me. I always pick the wrong one because I know the answers. All right, now we're up to 11 now. Okay.
It's great. People are listening.
Yeah. I don't think I shared the sound, but there's music playing. Can you hear it?
Nope.
Oh, okay. You're lucky.
Okay.
Very annoying.
It's all right. We can talk. We can chit chat. That's cool.
Question 5.
I guess the winner might come down to the speed. It's gap analysis, right?
Did I pick the wrong? Okay,
It's gap analysis.
sorry. All right. Diana.
Congratulations, Diana.
All right. So for the raffle, we're gonna raffle off a book. Pamela Patterson spoke to our chapter last month, and the last couple of years actually. And she wrote a book called Getting the Job or Get the Job, Optimizing Your Resume for the Online Job Search. And if you were here last week, at the end of the event, she put on another half an hour of talking about how to get through like the online HR bot systems with your resume. So this would be a good book to have if you don't win. It's on Amazon. I think it's like $15 for the paperback. So everybody gets to be in the wheel of names. And we'll spin this one. All right. So I'll reach out, email to see how you want the book. And that's, you know what, I forgot to stop recording. So everyone that watches the recap gets to play along too. So that's it for me. You guys, thank you so much again, Emily. I'll have the recording and the presentation up on and the agenda if you need the CDU proof on our website in the next day or two.
That's great. So everyone read Pamela Patterson's book first, secure the interview, and then read my presentation after.
Hey,
Nice. And Steve, just to save an email for
Yeah.
the book, you would need Sithaj to send to you the address where she wants it shipped, right?
yes.
So
Unless you want the
Sithaj,
e-version, and then we can just email the Kindle thing.
yeah, so contact Steve with either your address, or if you want the e-version, let him know and we'll get that out to you.
All right.
Thanks, Emily. And
You're
you know, I
welcome.
mentioned before when just a few of us were on, we do have a $25 Amazon gift card for Emily for putting this together and sharing your time, especially in the Eastern time zone. We really appreciate it. And Steve, again, thank you for putting on another great presentation.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
All
you,
right.
everyone. I
you.
appreciate the invite, and hopefully we'll talk again sometime soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Sounds good.
Starting my planning for next year.
There you go. You want to be one of those top chapters again.
Yes. All right.
Nice.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.